Before we begin, I'd appreciate if you'd subscribe if you like what I've done here, and join the over 32,000 who already have. We'll also help you keep tabs on when more videos like this are out. It's been 3 years since Smash Ultimate wrapped up DLC. Playing the waiting game until next game has left fans plenty of time to think about this game. We've appreciated the unfathomable work it took for Ultimate's roster to happen at all. Other strengths have begun to shine brighter, like how amazingly well animated almost everyone is. We've also become more aware of Ultimate's flaws, as fans, myself included, have criticized the game's shortcomings, hoping the next entry will learn from them and be even better. That extends to the designs of the fighters themselves. We've had years now to learn them in and out, and while some have aged like a fine wine, others have tarnished over time. As a content creator and a competitive player, I've become very aware of the rough spots. So let's talk about which of Ultimate's characters are designed the worst. A more complicated question than you'd think, because first we need to ask, the worst based on what? Let's start here. Which of Ultimate's characters have designs that sounded good on paper, but just don't work in practice? A few come to mind. When Little Mac was first revealed for Smash 4, it got people curious how a mostly normal boxer would hold his own against other larger-than-life opponents. Smash's answer was a hardline focus on grounded combat and an uber-powerful super attack tied to a meter. Which sounds extreme because it is. Mac's entire air game isn't just weak, it's borderline useless. The big draw of platform fighters is more free-form movement, yet he can hardly access an entire dimension of that movement. The devs tried to compensate by overtuning his grounded attacks, with very fast tilts, armored smash attacks he can fire off recklessly, and his infamous KO punch, which Smash loosely adapted from the arcade games that didn't feature Little Mac, instead of using the much flashier Star Punch from his games, which altogether has left Mac so polarizing that it drags his design down completely. He's so oppressive on the ground, yet so punchless in the air, no pun intended, that it makes his game plan in neutral situations predictable, makes his recovery extremely vulnerable, and makes the optimal way to fight him involve getting the lead and camping on any available platforms instead of actively engaging. Having a big unblockable super attack that cheeses stocks early doesn't fix that problem, it just makes him even more extreme. So much that it's left him worse off design-wise and competitively for 2 games counting. Big sign that something went wrong? A character who is massively popular in their home series is barely played in a crossover game. Lucario's been a fan-favorite Pokemon ever since the species' debut in Gen 4, yet Lucario in Ultimate is one of the least played fighters in the game. The likely culprit is the intrusive gimmick dragging the moveset down. Lucario's Smash design was built around aura attacks that get stronger the more damage you've taken. On paper, this adds a unique risk versus reward factor that encourages surviving as long as you can at high percents, and it held up fine in Brawl. But Smash 4 doubled down on it, turning the comeback aura into something the moveset completely and utterly revolved around. Suddenly, Lucario was unsatisfyingly weak at the start of each match and after losing a stock, unless you're behind, until you took more damage, which also exposed the moveset's slow frame data and mostly small hitboxes. Seriously, why is the martial artist character so terrible at footsies? These problems were propped up temporarily by Smash 4's overtuned rage mechanic, making Lucario kill ridiculously early at high percents, but with rage being handled better in Ultimate, these design flaws have nothing to hide behind anymore. Hopefully next game can reorient this character into a competent fighter who benefits extra from boosted aura, instead of relying on it to get by. The reveal that Dragon Quest's player characters, 4 of them, were getting in as DLC caught a lot of attention, especially in Japan. Finally, Smash was extending an invite to the granddaddy of Eastern RPGs, and a moveset that looked to embody as much of that classic style as it could fit. But a few weeks later, we learned about the moveset in detail, including its awkward execution. While incorporating some RPG elements, like an MP meter, was a good idea, others were less so. Some kind of randomness is usually a part of the genre, like random enemy encounters, accuracy rolls, and secondary effects or status ailments. But building heroes down special around rolling a random selection of magic? That's generally not a thing in RPGs, especially not Dragon Quest. It feels like the devs tried to force a concept that didn't actually fit the character very well, and made a few spells on the list extra powerful to make it worth gambling for them mid-match, which made some people afraid at first that Hero would win tournaments through pure luck. But that didn't happen, because the rest of the moveset feels intentionally restrained between the stiff movement, clunky frame data, and reliance on buffs and randomly rolled big spells to keep pace. Hero's entire implementation just feels off. And if you're playing in a language you're not familiar with, good luck. We all remember the shock and surprise when One-Winged Angel started playing in that trailer. Sephiroth made such an impact that he bent the rest of DLC speculation around wondering if more villains would follow him. But have you noticed how much he's fallen off in the time since the hype wore out? Because just like Little Mac, Seph's design is built around extremes to a fault. His upsides are obvious: giant disjointed sword, terrifying threats across his moveset, and his winged form gives him extra buffs that act like the second phase of an RPG boss fight. This is what appealed to a lot of folks when he first released. But almost 4 years later, Seph's equally serious flaws have dragged him down. His range and power are kept in check by some of the worst frame data in the game, easily overwhelmed by anyone with speedier attacks who can close the distance. His moveset is plagued with inconsistencies, from his 2 types of sword moves with different sweet spots that require different spacing, to winged form varying wildly on when it activates and how long it sticks around, none of which helps a character who is very tall and easy to hit/combo, and very light and easy to KO. A mishmash of extremes that robs him of any consistency, which has caused both his player base and tournament results to wither away. Before we move on, a couple honorable mentions. Dr. Mario was meant as a slower but stronger version of Mario's moveset, but for the last 2 games, he's just been very slow and short-ranged with possibly the worst recovery in all of Ultimate, bottlenecking his ability to use his stronger attacks and making him just Mario but worse 99% of the time. And have you noticed how hardly anyone plays Banjo and Kazooie despite the overwhelming reaction to their reveal and how faithful their moveset is? Because those moves were set up in a way that made the duo a slow-paced zoner-ish fighter with strangely low damage output who have to grind their way to wins, which wasn't what most of their fans were hoping for. But there's more than one way a moveset can go bad. Some start out fine at first, but fail to evolve with the character, no longer portraying them as well as they should. For example, Samus Aran has been a Smash mainstay since the first game. Despite her series' ups and downs, she's kept a dedicated fan base, especially in the West. It says a lot that one of the most requested newcomers for multiple Smash games was her archenemy. As a playable fighter, though, Samus has been weird. Smash 64 gave her an odd combination of zoning projectiles and close-up brawling tools, a hybrid playstyle that dabbles in both without going all in on either. Very much a product of its time. A lot of 64's movesets were janky because the devs were still figuring out how to establish archetypes in a platform fighter, and understanding how to create zoner characters in this different environment took some time. Yet as more full-on zoners have shown up in later entries, Samus's quote-quote half-zoner style has still stood out, which hasn't solved the actual problem. Most of her moveset hasn't changed in over 20 years, while her canon repertoire keeps expanding. We've gotten several new Metroid games in the time since, all adding more weapons, more abilities, and more refined movement. Yet Samus in Smash still feels like a snapshot from Super Metroid and little else. And now with the recent Metroid Dread and the upcoming Prime 4, she needs some updates badly in Smash 6, or else she'll feel even more like a relic of the past. Samus isn't the only one with this problem. The leader of the bunch has so many people who play him for fun that you'd never realize how few of them are actually satisfied with his current design. Because just like Samus, Donkey Kong is still relying hard on his awkward Smash 64 moveset. In his case, the devs were trying to figure out how to make a big heavyweight work in a platform fighter, which you could argue took multiple games. All of DK's arm swings, kicks, and pounding attacks aren't out of character, but they are pretty generic. And after all this time, they're still carrying the load of a moveset that has shockingly few things he's actually known for. It took until Smash 4 just to get his rolling attack into here. And while a handful of fighters have had one of their specials get made up to fit their intended playstyle, DK is the opposite. Only one of his specials is based on something he's actively done in his games. So much of the big guy's kit is still a carryover from Smash's early awkwardness, failing to actually capture who he is beyond being a big stubborn gorilla who carries people around, which has left his fans hoping that next game will actually incorporate more of what makes DK DK. Kirby has always been simple and beginner-friendly, and his Smash design was meant to do that in a new environment. His floatiness and very good recovery are a safety net for players who are younger or inexperienced with fighting games, and his ability to copy opponents' neutral specials lets them test a bunch of other moves out while fighting fire with fire in a way that's always fun. It's a shame then that Kirby's been so underwhelming for the last couple games. Just like Samus and DK, his moveset has barely changed since the beginning. While it is more inspired than either of theirs, has several moves from the fighter ability and a few from Suplex and Ninja, it's still rooted in the past. Considering Kirby's modern era has become so iconic, that feels off. Surely there's room to work in a few things that recent games added to his abilities, right? But Kirby has a deeper problem. His entire design has glaring weak points that have cut his competitive potential short while making him less appealing to casuals compared to other beginner-friendly characters. With short range, merely okay ground mobility, slow and floaty jumps, and no consistently usable projectiles or burst options, Kirby has serious trouble approaching and getting stuff going without the disproportionate reward of some other characters. A rework could also address these, making him more modernized and less chained down. Be honest, you knew this one was coming as soon as this section started. Ganondorf has a reputation among Smash fans. Despite being a common pocket character just like DK, he's long been seen as the series' epitome of missed potential, mostly because of how he originally got in. Snuck into Melee at the last minute because the devs wanted clone characters to pad the roster with, and he feasibly fit over Captain Falcon with some adjustments to stats and visuals. And since Smash hasn't completely replaced movesets that already exist so far, Falcondorf has been a mainstay with only minor adjustments. To its credit, the current kit does capture his raw power and works in a couple moves he's used in his boss fights, but it still leaves fans wanting in every other way. Ganondorf, above almost everyone else, is the biggest example of someone who would gain from Smash 6 biting the bullet and overhauling a bunch of veterans. Will the devs dare to retool his moveset, keeping what works and changing what doesn't? Will they pull it off without alienating the people who already play him? And will they draw from his most recent appearance with the multiple weapons he wields in his boss fight and the decay-inducing gloom magic at his fingertips? Another honorable mention real quick, one that has just begun to show its age. Zelda's design and its reliance on Ocarina of Time hasn't lost its luster yet, but now we have two other Zeldas from two recent games with very interesting abilities available. I've seen fans already hoping one or the other gets the nod for Smash 6. What's one more way to look at it? If a character is so infuriating to fight against, so demoralizing for most of the roster to deal with, that they make people want to stop playing, does that not make them badly designed? Because Ultimate has a few we need to talk about. Unfortunately, we have to start here. As the oft-overshadowed Mario brother who tries his best despite his fears and shortcomings, Luigi is the kind of character people should want to cheer for. Yet his moveset has evolved to be one of the most toxic in all of Smash. What started as a quirkier version of Mario's kit has become a feast or famine design that relies on getting specific openings, then converts those openings into a ton of damage or an instant KO. Connect with his grab at 0%? Dead. Get a grab at certain mid or high percent ranges? Also dead. Hit with a fireball or a Zare when close enough? Free grab and dead. And he can reverse any attempts to combo him that aren't guaranteed by mashing his down special, which makes him instantly invincible when in the air. Luigi is far from a top-tier menace. He struggles to approach, has linear recovery, and his terrible airspeed contributes to both. What we have instead is unhealthy for a different reason. A character who spends most of the match getting knocked around, but can still take an entire stock the instant an opponent makes a single mistake. An acquired taste at best to play as, infuriating to play against, and worse, it turns Luigi, of all people, into someone most fans actively root against. When Smash brings in someone from a fighting game, it always goes all out, transferring their movement, mechanics, and overall feel as one-to-one as possible, as we found out with Min Min transferring the feel of ARMS from a 3D arena fighter to a 2D platform fighter. And then the devs piled a lot of extra bonuses on. Can throw out 2 attacks at a time while still being able to move, her right arm has 3 different modes with different roles, and her dragon head arms can breathe fire after a punch, breath that gets supercharged for a while after she throws someone, which can lead to very cheesy early stocks. And her ability to kick in addition to punch got extrapolated into a set of shockingly fast options up close in case opponents close the gap. It feels like the devs gave Min Min as many upsides as possible, including some she doesn't even have in arms, like extra high damage per hit and her fists losing their hurt boxes while punching, in a game where a lot of the roster already isn't built to deal with her brand of long-range combat. This lack of contextual balancing makes her feel privileged, without enough unique weak points, and not feel frustrating for most players to deal with. Sakurai and the devs finally figured out how to get a Tekken character working in Smash near the end of Fighters Pass 2. Apparently, getting Kazuya to feel like he walked right out of his home series left him feeling underpowered during development, so extra liberties were taken to help him measure up. And therein lies the problem. It's not just the ludicrously high damage per hit, or the instant death combos, or electric wind god fists somehow being easier and more busted than in most actual Tekken games. It's also all of the extra traits his moves have that you'd never know just from looking at them. Imagine how many casual players kept losing to him because they had no idea why their moves were always getting beaten out by his, oblivious that all of Kazuya's grounded moves have frames of partial intangibility or outright invincibility because nothing in-game indicates it. To say no less of the passive armor against weak attacks, or left splits kick being the strongest reflector in the game for no apparent reason other than to make him less weak to projectiles. It doesn't do that in Tekken. They made Kazuya so uncontestable that, just like Little Mac, the best way to deal with him is refusing to engage the moment you have the lead. If the optimal strategy in a matchup, on both sides, is take away the other guy's ability to play, then something went seriously wrong. Alright, time to talk about the funny block man. Working a bunch of Minecraft-like gimmicks into Steve's design was fine on paper, but the execution gave him a unique set of over-tuned options that make him more privileged than anyone else in Ultimate. Other videos have gone deep into detail already, but you've seen the highlights plenty if you've been following the community the last few years. Steve's resource gimmick doesn't hold him back when building a wall and mining behind it is so easy. His overly faithful attack animations are extremely active, with oversized hitboxes on top of overtuned knockback when using stronger materials. Minecart is a hard-hitting burst option and command grab that renders opponents trapped in it sitting ducks even after they get out, while Steve can jump out and act instantly. Block structures make easy, cheesy kill setups or survival setups on Steve's part, while also able to obstruct ledges to stop recoveries at any percent in ways the devs tried to make impossible, but it can just happen anyway, the whole 9 yards. That last part actually embodies the problem here. The most degenerate stuff comes from Steve doing things the devs actively tried and failed to prevent, which becomes tragic once you realize that, based on timing, development on this character likely began right when COVID lockdowns started happening and the devs were scrambling just to get work done at all, which means the most complicated fighter in Smash history was likely also the least tested in all of Ultimate. Explains a lot, huh? Hopefully if Steve comes back next game, he's handled better. Meta Knight and Bayonetta were bigger problems at their height, and the following games brought them back down to earth. Couple more honorable mentions. Mr. Game & Watch had some annoying stuff in previous games, but Ultimate is where he became a problem. Moves that are all fast, super active, and or super safe let him get away with mashing attacks like few others can, while his lightning fast up special bails him out of pressure for free. You can imagine how quickly that gets on people's nerves. Meanwhile, Rob never stood out much until Ultimate gave him everything. Fast moves to poke with, bigger, safer stuff you can just throw out and see if it hits, combos for days, zero trouble taking stocks, and multiple projectiles, including one with insta-kill setups at nearly any percent. A jack of all trades and a master of most, and other than being easy to combo, has no weak points to speak of. But there is someone we haven't mentioned yet. One character who combines everything we've discussed so far in one crowning example of bad design. Who is it? To anyone who has played Ultimate enough, this comes as no surprise. There's a reason why everyone who makes these videos calls Sonic the worst of the worst, and it's because his moveset is the poster child of this game's biggest mistakes. Design-wise, his moveset is still underbaked and underwhelming after all this time. A lot of it dates back to when Brawl rushed him into the game mid-development, and even now he has multiple moves where he just curls into a ball or spins in place. A stark contrast to how big Sonic's repertoire has gotten in his games and spin-offs. There's so much to work with, yet Smash has repeatedly dropped the ball, no pun intended, making his depiction here feel like a pale imitation of the real deal. And that bleeds into his playstyle too. Despite Sonic being all about flashy, high-octane gameplay in his home series, his moveset in its current form has made him the single campiest character on the roster for 2 games and counting. Instead of being built to weave in and out of range and blindside foes with attacks while keeping momentum, he's built to run away, charge a spin from the other side of the stage, try to hit with it, then retreat and do it all over again if it doesn't work. Notice how that involves barely interacting with his opponents? And if a Sonic playing to win ever gets the lead, then you better hope you don't have anywhere to be, because his optimal strategy then is to run away until the timer runs out, slowing down the pace of the match as much as possible in a complete antithesis of everything this character is supposed to be. Sonic needs an overhaul next game to fix all of this. Something that reorients his moveset to be a proactive hit-and-run fighter who keeps the pressure on while hyping up everyone watching nearby, like he would want to, instead of this. And that is a surprisingly comprehensive list of the worst designed characters in Smash Ultimate. Some that sounded good in concept but don't work in practice, others who've failed to evolve alongside the characters, a few whose designs look fine but are utterly demoralizing to fight against, and one who embodies all of the above. I guess it makes sense that a game with such an enormous roster would have this many who have problems, but maybe we can learn from where all of these went wrong? Hopefully the Smash 6 team is able to fix however many of these make it back. But who would you say are Ultimate's worst fighter designs? Anyone you think I overlooked? How do they compare to previous Smash games, or to other fighting games? And hey, maybe I could do a follow-up on the best designed characters in Ultimate. Shout out in the comments if you'd be interested in that. Anyway, thanks to the following for helping with this video, and to my patrons for continuing to support me. And if you want to see how Smash veterans could get reworked for next game, I've actually covered a majority of the characters in this video already, and I have one for Little Mac lined up for later this year, if it's not out already by the time you're watching this. So, until next time, wonder if you could get through this video faster than a competitive set with a Sonic in it.